Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first of our Journey Unseen series today with Miss Kaye Monk Morgan. You are in for a treat. We are very pleased that you joined us today for this fireside conversation with one of our professional women in our community. I'm sure many of you are familiar with her, and we will introduce to some of the others of you. I am Janetta Everett, Vice President of Professional Relations at Delta Dental of Kansas. I'm also the 2020 Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce Board Chair. Before we get started today with the program, I want to go over a few housekeeping items that will help us keep us on schedule. You were muted as you came in and joined us today, and so please stay muted until we get to the breakout rooms and/or the question and answer portion of the event. We ask that you please turn on your cameras. We want to make this as normal as we can, so we want to see your faces. It's not fair if you can see mine, but I can't see yours. We also recommend that you switch your settings to the speaker view to optimize your experience. If you can, please rename yourself with your full name and your organization on your profile. And lastly, feel free to utilize the reactions so you can interact throughout the conversations. Let me first say that this event would not even be possible without the program sponsors. So give me a second, I'd like to recognize all of them. Our presenting sponsor is Signal Theory. Our corporate host sponsors are BKD, LLP, Martin Pringle, Attorney at Law, McCowan Gordon Construction, and Thrive Restaurant. Our speaker sponsor is Moxie Boutique, sorry. And our beverage sponsor is the Monarch, and I know that's the one that you all appreciate the most. Thank you for your generous sponsorship to all of our sponsors. We are able now to raise the awareness about all of the professional women in our communities, and you'll get to hear a lot of their stories. Again, this could not be possible without your sponsorships. So joining us today is Ms. Lottie Da Silva, Managing Director of Signal Theory, and I'd like to invite Lottie to make a few remarks. Lottie?
Thanks, Janetta. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you all, even though it's virtual. So thank you so much for making the effort to gather around your laptops and your screens. On behalf of myself and the Signal Theory team, I want to welcome you to Journey Unseen, the Chamber's female-focused mentoring event. So at Signal Theory, we really encourage each other through mentorship, and we do that by building into and believing in the individual and their potential. And we think that's the way we're going to get to the best versions of ourselves. And I am really excited tonight to introduce you to Kaye Monk Morgan, who I personally have been inspired by and can call her a former neighbor. So I'd like to share a little bit about why I think you're going to be really inspired about Kaye. Kaye is currently in the role of Interim Vice President of Regional Engagement and Economic Development at Wichita State University. And she offers a supremely unique blend of executive vision, leadership acumen, and a super strong desire to help students achieve and complete college successfully. And I've personally been able to witness firsthand Kaye's leadership and impact by serving on a community board with her and also watching along how she worked with my mom at Wichita State University when she was running a federally funded program to help first-generation students graduate from college. And I'm here to say that Kaye is the real deal, and I'm really excited for you to hear her words of wisdom this evening. And please welcome her as she shares her story and discusses her unspoken path to leadership. Welcome, Kaye.
Thank you, Lottie. We are so thankful for your engagement in moving this effort forward. We all do, you're right, look forward to hearing from Ms. Kaye Monk Morgan. Moderating today's conversation, however, is Ms. Christina Long. And just before you hear Kaye, I'd like to introduce you to Christina. Christina is a powerhouse of an individual. I do want to ask that once the conversation starts, however, please use the Zoom chat function for all your questions, and there will be an opportunity for Kay to answer them. Back to Miss Christina Long. She is a very, very well-known person in this community. She is an entrepreneur, a community builder. She is one who is very passionate about diversity, inclusion, and economic development through entrepreneurship. She is the owner of CML Collective LLC, a graphic design and a communication services company. And she's also the founder of the Create Campaign, Inc., is a nonprofit that activates urban entrepreneurs in Kansas to launch, innovate, and to grow. More importantly, is I have known this young lady since she was a really young kid at my youth group. So I've watched her grow up, and I couldn't be more proud. I would like today for you to join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming Ms. Christina Long.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I am Christina Long, and I just want to say to my friends at the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for thinking enough of me to invite me to this moment, to this conversation, where we are preparing to dialogue with a woman who I am a complete fangirl of, and that is Kaye Morgan. Lathy did an amazing job introducing her, so we will definitely be able to dive further into her journey, her story in just a second. But before we do, I do have to say, in the age of COVID, it has been really interesting how we're able to pivot and innovate. And while you're going to see our wonderfully beautiful faces up close, Kit AV and their staff, kudos to you all. We came in masked. They've got hand sanitizer for us. We are actually more than 6 feet apart, and there is a cool plexiglass little contraption that is separating us. So again, when we're thinking about how to maintain and have conversations and dialogue and try to continue with the semblance of normal, this is our new normal. And so Kent, thank you very much for making sure that we're all good for this conversation tonight. All right, so when we talk about the journey unseen, by nature, by the essence of it, we have to go deeper than the superficial. We have to go deeper than the surface. So you want to talk about being able to kick off this series with a bang. Kaye Morgan is our bang. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this moment.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here. I feel like there's a lot of hype. I hope I don't disappoint by just sharing a little bit about what my experience has been. I echo your comments. We're here together, but yet apart. Yeah. And there are others in lots of spaces here with us. And so I'm grateful to be here and grateful to have been I'm honored to just be a part of this experience.
Thank you. Well, you have so many different jewels that you're going to give us tonight. Yeah. I just want to let everybody who's watching know you better get a pen, get ready to chat. You're going to pick up jewels all throughout. Excuse me. So when we get ready to dive into this conversation with the idea, the framing of the journey unseen, we're going to go deep. And I'm going to ask you, when you think about this moment in your journey, how would you define it in a word or maybe a sentence, this moment in your journey?
An episode, right? That this is but a part of a much larger picture. Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind, you said a word, I don't know that this is a word, is just the part that's unseen. Yeah. You know, Beyonce has a song that I hear all the time that says, I woke up like this. And I think for a lot of folks, we assume that the people we aspire to be like, or that we see in movement around spaces, that they wake up like this. I didn't wake up like this.
Yeah. So, you know, Lathy had talked about your new title that you're wearing, the Interim Vice President of Regional Engagement and Economic Development. You talk about putting that on and wearing it, but take us back to little Kaye.
Yeah.
Who's little Kaye?
Little Kaye, I don't know that she's all that much different. She's dressed a little better, but that may be about it. I'm a native Wichitan, born and raised here in Wichita, on what we proudly call the North Side. Graduated from North High School, which happened, both of my parents graduated from North, all of my siblings graduated from North. I'm a proud graduate of Wichita Public Schools, and so this is my home. I'm fully engaged in this community, in part because this is my choice. I'm the oldest of 4 fabulous siblings born to Shirley and Melvin Mayberry. the oldest of almost 28 grandchildren. So we were we talk about leadership. I don't know that it's so much I'm leader, I'm just the oldest. And so grew up in a small kind of an enclave here in town where we didn't grow up with a lot of financial wherewithal, but lots of love, lots of faith, lots of adult supervision and attention being paid to our decision making and how we engaged with the world. And so really fortunate, very fortunate. Graduated from high school, went to Wichita State, I didn't know how I was going to go to college.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, I was a smart kid. I am a smart kid. I continue to be a smart kid, and was convinced by my high school counselor to apply for a scholarship competition. And to be real transparent, I didn't fill out the application paperwork. And so he called me to his office and told me to do it. At the time, my family didn't have a car. We lived, I said, on the north side of town, and the competition, of course, was at Wichita State. He called my grandfather, who happened to have been listed as my emergency contact on your people information form, and told him that I had this unique opportunity to go and compete for a scholarship at Wichita State, and asked if he would provide me with transportation.
Wow.
And my grandfather called me at home and was like, I hear you need a ride to go do this. And so that gave me an opportunity to find a way to pay for college that otherwise I don't know that I would have gone. I don't know how I would have gone.
And that's scary. That's nerve-wracking to be at that space and to figure out, like, I have aspirations to move forward, but how is it going to happen?
Yeah. Well, and being in that space of, this is what I've assumed is going to happen for me, but as a first generation college student, having an assumption of what was going to happen and being able to make those things happen were two very different things, which is part of the passion for the work that I've done for a really long time.
Because you've lived it.
I've lived it. It's a lived experience that motivates and encourages, inspires me to do the types of work that I get a chance to do now every day.
That's right. You know, you have such a passion for, again, the term first generation college student. And it looks great on a piece of paper. You know, this is a program that serves first generation, but you were that. Talk about what it was like transitioning and getting acclimated to the campus life as a quote unquote first generation student. What was that like for you?
It's very difficult. You know, I tell students on campus and faculty that I engage with is college and universities weren't created for people like me. I happened to have the opportunity to go there, but they are being currently, and even at that point, retrofit for people of color, for women, and for economically disadvantaged people. And so to assume that I was going to have capital when I got there was a falsehood. The capital that I had was that because of the moniker of a Gore Scholar that automatically gives you some. And it allowed me to connect with people that otherwise I might not have connected with. So you think of Elizabeth King or James Radigan, or, you know, folks who have permeated my educational life. There was fear, and not from a sense of not being academically prepared, but walking a dual life. Right. And so you get to college campus and you are fully engaged in that experience. But that is a very different experience than when you go home with your cousins in your community who have different sets of expectations for you. I will never forget having had to have a conversation with my grandmother, who was concerned about the fact that I had not shown up for Sunday school for 3 weeks in a row. Yes, and you never too grown to not go to Sunday school, says Ozell Kirkendall. And I had to explain to her that my chemistry study group met at the same time as Sunday school. And I was a chemistry undergraduate. If I was going to graduate with a degree in chemistry, I needed to go to Sunday school I could do on Wednesday night, but the study group, I needed to be there for that. And so walking in the duality of those two universes was really difficult. And oftentimes as university administrators, I don't know that we fully understand what we expect our students to do when they show up on our campus and they have to meet the expectations of two, in some cases, very dichotomous worlds.
That's right.
And they have to do it with excellence on both sides.
That's right. Now, you mentioned something that was really interesting. Again, in telling your story about being a first generation student, you also decided you wanted to be a chemistry undergrad. Really?
Yeah.
Tell us why.
Because, you know, I had a high school teacher, Janice Crowley, inspired me, and I loved chemistry. I loved the why of things, or if you put these things together, they do something, but why do they do that? And that kind of runs throughout my entire career. I'm not a chemist, but I've always been a chemistry student. So I did what I was good at doing. I took the classes where I got the best grades in high school, not because anybody really challenged me or even funneled me that way. It just, when you're poor and you're first and you don't know what you're really supposed to do, you do what you've always done because that's what worked. And chemistry was one of those things that worked. Interestingly enough, I didn't get a job in chemistry because I didn't know what to do with a chemistry degree.
Interesting.
Can you imagine?
Interesting.
93, an African-American female with a chemistry degree, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I went back to school because I was good at doing that.
What did you do when you went back to school?
Yeah. I got a master's degree in public administration.
Pause.
Yeah.
Undergrad chemistry.
Yeah.
First generation student.
Yes.
Now you're going for advanced degrees, advanced learning. Again, this is something when you look at our demographic, when you look at our gender as well, our data doesn't always show up and present itself like this. So again, when you're talking about that journey unseen, you're navigating a course that does not look normal.
Yeah. I didn't know anyone who had a master's degree. Didn't know anybody who'd done that before.
So who said you could?
James Radigan, which is a constant in my life.
Yeah.
His name will probably come up again. And for those of your listeners that are familiar with Wichita State or an alum of Wichita State, for any number of years was the Dean of Students and Vice President for Student Affairs on our campus, and still highly and heavily engaged in our campus community now, said, well, if you're gonna work here, then you might as well be in school. So what are you doing? So I thought, okay, of these things, this is the most of interest to me.
Yeah.
Because it had an opportunity, that particular degree pattern allowed for real investment and consideration of how communities were developed. And I recognized very early on that the community in which I inhabited was very different than some of the communities that I visited. How was that resource allocation created? What were the systems that, again, the why? How did these things come to be? And if my communities, the communities of which my children would ultimately be born into, had access, somebody would have to figure out why they didn't have access and how to get it over there.
Yeah.
And so that was the inspiration for that.
That's great. Tell us about entering into the professional world. Talk to us about that journey of pivoting from, again, where you've been, all the things that you've experienced as a student, and then coming onto the professional world as a professional Kaye.
Yeah. You know, we make it look easy. I been really fortunate that all of my professional career has been held at Wichita State. I've had several different positions there, but all of my for-work pay as an adult, right, has been in that environment. And so transitioning from being a student in a space where people identify you as a student,
That's right,
has been difficult.
Yeah.
It's a little easier now because most of the folks that saw me as Kaye the kid have retired, but faculty don't leave institutions very early. Tenure is one of those things where we get to keep folks for a really long time. And so I had to be mindful of the stories that people tell about you, and then the narratives that you allow to stand, and how you go about correcting those narratives in spaces. And in some cases, I think that's emboldened me to be even more transparent and authentic, because I've had to fight for space and time in places where it seemed to be gifted to other people.
Okay, so see right there. Could you share with us an example of how you had to gracefully, but also let people know, this is how you regard me?
Yeah. Well, my grandma used to say that you teach people how to treat you. And I believe that people's engagement with you, how you respond to that treatment, teaches them how they will return that favor, or what that looks like in the future. I've had folks in my professional career say stuff like, "You're intimidating," and "You're just so articulate." And my response often is, given the type of role that I play at the university, we would expect that I be articulate.
Right.
And I look forward to the day when it's not surprising to you that your administrators are articulate.
Because that is not a compliment.
It is not a compliment. or you're intimidated. And my response is, well, it's unfortunate that you are intimidated, right? I mean, so we have to own our own behavior and the stories we tell. I've not done anything to intimidate you. That you feel that way is of concern for me, but I don't own the responsibility for causing that.
How did you get there though? How did you get to the place
Yeah.
where it became more comfortable for you to be able to, again, have those kinds of responses when there was something that was said that was just not appropriate?
It was more uncomfortable for me to not say anything. And I got to a point where I decided it was easier for me for that person to not sleep because they were considering their behavior than it was for me to not sleep because I couldn't get over their behavior. I can only own the things that I'm accountable for. And it became a matter of, I did this on behalf of young people every day, right? So I would not hesitate to make a call on behalf of a student and advocate for that student and have that type of bold integrity and transparency, never rude, but very forthright on behalf of a student, but I wouldn't do it for myself. And I would go home and be frustrated. And my mother who has a high school diploma would say, well, I don't understand why you would do for others what you won't do for you.
Wow.
And with real plain talk would explain to me that this is what it's like to be an African-American woman. You've chosen to be in these spaces. You've chosen to surround yourself with people who may or may not understand your walk. And so to the degree that you're comfortable, you're responsible for helping them understand what that looks like.
My goodness. So we've had multiple conversations.
Yes.
You have shown up and presented a topic called being the only one in the room and how to navigate those spaces where you are different. And there may be some who are struggling with just that, especially now in the backdrop of what's happening, either because COVID has made us come to terms with ourselves, right?
Yes.
Or what's happening with the racial unrest that's
Yeah.
in our country. For those who may be struggling to find their voice, but they know it's there, what would you say to them?
Yeah. I say you share your voice on your own terms. And I've had to do some work on this myself because there are places and spaces where people feel like they have an obligation to say, well, Kaye, what do you think about that? Well, what I've decided is I get to engage the way I want to engage. And that no person, particularly a person with privilege, has a right to tell me how to use whatever capital I've been able to establish. I get to decide how I do that. So I would tell folks that first. And then I would say that to the degree that you are comfortable in your own space, it only gets better if indeed you share. And that requires some transparency and that requires some vulnerability. I think I have had more frank conversations over coffee and drinks with my white male colleagues in the last 6 weeks than I probably have in the last 6 years about what the realities are for folks that like me, or folks mothers who are raising African-American sons, or any number of different conversations. And so I've decided, at least for me, I've got to find a lane where I have comfort and I have confidence that I'm advancing the mission, and stick to it. So we haven't been able to we didn't do a lot of protest in our house. We have health conditions that don't allow that. So I told my kids, because it's important to me that they see that I'm living the life that I talk about, right? You got to walk the talk. This is how I'm engaging in this space, and this is how I'm trying to make things better. So I would say define where you can make a difference, where you're comfortable making a difference, and just do that.
Absolutely. When we talk about building capital, and you mentioned capital a couple of times, define for us, how do you define capital?
I think capital is a reputation and a brand for doing what it is that you say you're going to do, and for being consistent performer with regard to your work product, whether that is work for pay or work that you do in the community. I think my capital, if I have some, was earned very early. I tell students that I work with, we sometimes don't take early wins in our lives as important, but literally the story that is told about you in spaces and places time and time again can go back to something you did when you were 12. People decide who you are, and you're given privileges and responsibilities and access based on those. And the things that I did when I was 12 are the things that allow me to do the things that I'm doing at 49.
Absolutely.
I believe that's to be a continuum of place. So for me, it's that capital is earned by being the person you say you are.
Yeah. And even though you spoke earlier about this idea of the balance between being direct and forthright, doing so with grace, and holding and standing on your professional clout, when you mentioned the story that others tell about you, when we were talking earlier, you used a term that really caused me to pause. You described it as being able to be palatable.
Yeah.
There was a point about you being palatable. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think particularly when we're navigating spaces where we're minoritized as African-American women, or we're othered in some way, it is easy to be accepted if indeed people see you as non-threatening, if you are palatable. I have a really close friend who happens to be an African-American woman who is dark-skinned. And for those of you folks who are African-American or of color, you might understand some of the internal cultural issues that happen around colorism. And she has a running joke that we would go to meetings together, professional meetings, professional association meetings in particular, and we would be in a space and people would assume that she was going to be the aggressive one because she was the darker skinned of the two, and that I was going to be the nice one, whatever nice means, because I'm the fairer of the two. And she said they don't even know who they're talking to, which we would kind of laugh and joke, because I don't find myself to be aggressive, but I've been raised not to be a punk around any number of issues. And so I think that becomes a piece of how you navigate those spaces. You want to be palatable because you want to have access and you want people to respect and not feel as though it's a battle to engage you.
Right.
But you also, for me, I feel like I need people to know where I'm going to come from, and that it's going to be authentic and I'm going to be real.
Yeah.
And you can count on that.
So you talk about authenticity and realness, but at any point, especially navigating through higher education and your career on campus, did you ever feel anything like what some of us maybe have grappled with at one point, and that's imposter syndrome?
Every day.
Every day.
I pinch myself and say, how the heck did you get here?
Yeah.
Do they know you grew up at 21st and Grove? You're, by definition, you're not supposed to sit in the seat that you're in. Statistically speaking, there's nothing that the cards don't sort for me to be in the spaces and places that I'm in. So I get that. And there are times where I am reminded, my grandfather lived to be 102 years old up until a couple of years ago. And I get an opportunity to engage and think about his life journey and where he began and where he ended.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
Makes you have to take a break and breathe, because when folks wear t-shirts to say, I am my ancestors' dream, it's not a joke.
Yeah.
It's not a joke that my grandfather's parents were born enslaved. So it's not 200 years ago. It's not forever ago.
Right.
I can touch that.
Right.
And to be in a space where I get an opportunity to make space for other people who look like me, and people who don't look like me is intoxicating. But it can also be one of those things where you wake up in the morning and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this.
But you do it so well.
Well,
You do it so well. When people see you now, what do you hope that they understand about you visibly?
That everything that shines isn't necessarily shiny. That it's not pretty, and power doesn't mean there's no pain.
Oh my goodness.
Right? That this is a growth process, and that I am here. What you see before you is the benefit of lots of other people's work. And some of those people will never have a name, will never get an award, will never be on a sticker or on a Facebook post. But the work that they've done in helping to create people like me and hundreds of others, I don't know that I'm special in that regard. This is the culmination of what happens when the village works.
When the village works.
When the village works.
And what would you say that you are most proud of yourself, being at this space, at this time, in this moment?
My children.
Yeah.
Both the children that I gave birth to, and my 583 Upper Bound Math Science kids that are all over the world proliferating that which we believe to be true, in that they're growing in their integrity, that they're making decisions that challenge spaces that may not be hospitable to them, that they are committed to their children not being first.
Yeah.
Because they're picking up the burden and running in those spaces. There are lots of folks that are engaged in legacy building, and there are lots of folks that I talk about or who talk to me about, what do you want? My legacy has been created, and I see it living through lots of different young people who are now 30 and 40-year-old PhDs that will make more money and have greater impact than I ever thought I could have. That's it. I don't have to win anything else ever in my entire life. That is what it's about.
Wow. And yet you stay winning. And because you are so willing to share your story, to share your input, to step up and share your presence and power, that allows us all to win. So I want to thank you for bringing us to this point in our conversation tonight. I told you all, jewels scattered all around. We are going to transition into breakout rooms, because it would be unfair to us to be able to just have this dialogue and not allow you all to get in on it either. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. All you have to do is sit there. And basically, there's going to be small group discussion where you can take a moment to kind of process some of those things that you've heard from Kaye so far, be able to share an aha or two within your small group. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to go into some Q&A. Again, we wanted to make sure that this was as interactive as possible to allow many people to be able to have a say in AHA. So with that, chamber staff, I believe you guys are going to transition everyone into the breakout rooms. Welcome back. I hope that you all found the breakout rooms to be as enjoyable as our conversation, and you must have, because the Q&A that has come is so deep, so deep. So we're going to dive right into it. Question one, Kay, what
Yes.
was your biggest barrier or obstacle in your journey?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And you guys aren't playing out in Chamberland. You came for real with questions. I think the biggest barrier was and still is fear.
Mm.
And I have it's not mine, it's biblical, but God didn't give me the spirit of fear. And I think the moment I've decided that I'm not going to be scared, or that I'm not going to allow my fear to keep me from moving forward, is where that obstacle is diminished. I don't know, at some professional development experience somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
I did the exercise where they ask you, what's the absolute worst that can happen
Uh-huh.
if the worst happens?
Was that at KLC?
It might have been.
Kansas Leadership
Does that
Center.
sound like a
That
KLC
sounds
thing?
familiar.
It might have been a KLC thing. So if you imagine what the worst is, and if that's the absolute worst, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can recover from that. And so I think the biggest is fear.
That's awesome. That's very good. All right. Well, question two, from
Yeah.
the biggest obstacle to your favorite moment. What was your favorite moment in your journey?
I don't know if I have a favorite moment. I feel like I've lived a life of favor. I feel like God has I've been blessed in lots of different ways to have different experiences. I think a turning point in my life was going to college. I think that was a linchpin for me. That experience, which is why I'm so passionate about that, because it literally changed the trajectory of my life and that of my children, that of my cousins, that of for generations to go. If you get the right one, it changes the economic and social habits of generations of people. And so I don't know that I have a favorite, but that's certainly one that I think is pivotal.
Exactly, especially since you tied it to your lineage,
Yeah.
and not being so far removed
Yeah.
from slavery, to be the first to change that trajectory because of going to college. That's significant.
It made a huge difference.
Absolutely. Okay, question three. You talked about pain points. Please give us some advice about how to overcome pain points and how do you push through?
Pain is just discomfort, and it's there for a while, right? As one of my colleagues and my mentor, she doesn't know that I look at her as a mentor, but Danielle Johnson at Wichita State says all the time, you got to lean into discomfort.
Isn't she something?
Get you some, because that you have to grow. Growing is painful, right? Those experiences that stretch you. And so I think it's just a matter of living through it and knowing that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Absolutely.
And that those who have come before me had much bigger battles to fight.
Wow.
Much bigger battles to fight. If this is what causes me discomfort, again, I go back to my grandparents and my mother's experience as a teenage mom. I don't have any issues compared to that. Nothing that I can't solve.
Right.
So it may be discomfort and it may hurt my feelings, but grow up and it'll be okay.
It will be okay. There was something that came up during our conversation getting ready for today that kind of goes to question 4 about where will you be in the future. But right now, you shared with me that you're navigating kind of 2 roles at Wichita State University.
Yes.
With the regional engagement and economic development role, but then also your upward bound role, or assistant dean of students role. Can you talk about how you're navigating that? Just how is that going?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that I get to work alongside both our president and our executive team and our executive vice president and provost in providing support for strategic planning and assessment, accreditation, in addition to this new work. And it's a lot to balance. I do a little bit every day. I'm really fortunate that my leader, Rick Muma, says all the time, he comes from a healthcare background, and his question usually is anybody dying?
Yeah.
If no one's dying, it's okay. And if you don't get it done today, it'll be here tomorrow. And so that is a calming matter for me, in that I know that he gives me some grace in those expectations. I also get that I have real deadlines that I have to meet. Yeah. I'm awestruck at the opportunity that I have to make a difference at an institution that has been, I've been there for 30 years in
Mhm.
one capacity or another. And it's just a unique opportunity to be able to give to your alma mater in that way. And my children are students at Wichita State, so I work even more hard.
Yep.
More hard, is that the way you say that?
It's fine.
Even more intentionally.
There you go.
To make sure that they're having a good experience as well.
Absolutely. And when you talk about your experience, the institution has been with you for more than 30 years, but it's still allowing you to remake and renovate and innovate yourself. So what's next for you?
I have no idea, because if you'd asked me 2 years ago if this is where I would be, I would have told you, no. I am a firm believer that I am ever more in the space of preparing to prepare. And I don't know what it is that I'm preparing for, but I'm preparing for that which comes next, and I'll be ready when it shows up.
All right, ready when it shows up. The last question is a doozy. We kind of touched on a little bit of it earlier in the conversation, but one more time, give us examples of how to address inappropriate comments about stereotypical roles of women.
You know, I start with a place of grace. And as to the degree that you can, extend grace to folks and assume that there's a lack of understanding and that there's no malintent. That may not be the truth, but if we start from that space, then we can feel our time as educators and co-learners as opposed to lecturing folks. I think I try to operate by asking questions. Why is that your assumption? You know, I'm really fortunate that I have a husband who loves to cook. And if he doesn't love to cook, he pretends to love to cook enough that we eat on a regular basis. And he does that more so than I do. So when people say, what are you making for dinner? I don't know. I don't know. So I think you just do it with as much genuine, earnest response as you can give, and be as graceful with it as possible.
And you mentioned asking a question back. That definitely helps to kind of dilute and also gives the other person an opportunity to explain a little bit more, so you have more information to work with as well.
To see what they're actually talking about. Yes.
So weaving all of this together towards a conclusion, you know, we talk about finding our lanes and staying in our lanes, finding our space. Can you talk about, in your space, the impact that you have around others? What do you recommend is the first step to finding your lane, taking up space? What's the first step?
You know, I think it's figuring out where your personal alignment is. I believe that we're all divinely created to do a thing. And it may change at different points along your journey, but that we're divinely created to do something. What is it, that thing that you're supposed to do?
Right.
And I think when we're young, or at least in my experience, as I was younger, I defined it very narrowly. And so it allowed me to really focus and develop some expertise in an area. And as I grow older and hopefully wiser, I'm able to take that definition and expand it and say, you know what, you can do that from a lot of different vantage points. So where will you do that work next? So I think finding alignment, and you find alignment when it feels good, right? People say all the time, I want a job where I don't feel like I have to work. Well, I don't have a job where I feel like I don't have to work. I work really hard every day. But I do feel like it is value add.
Absolutely.
And it makes it worthwhile.
Makes it worthwhile. To that, before I prepare to hand it off to Janetta, I have to just close. You guys know, if you know me, I love good quotes. So I have to close with a quote from you. And that is, my experience has been led, not planned. I couldn't have planned this. I didn't create this. I try to be responsive to what has been created for me. A lot of this isn't for me. It's not about me. It's about others. Thank you for all you do for others.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Janetta, back to you.